The villagers of Bystrica spoke of the old castle only when the wind howled through the Carpathian Mountains. They whispered that the ancient stones bled when the moon turned a deep, foreboding red. They said the Count had returned. And on this night, the night of the blood moon, the howling began once more, a mournful, hungry sound echoing from the peaks. In London, far from those superstitious whispers, a young solicitor named Jonathan Harker held a letter. His hands trembled as he unfolded the fine parchment. The ink was a curious shade of crimson, the handwriting elegant but sharp, as if written with claws dipped in fine wine. It read, "To Mr. Jonathan Harker, you are cordially invited to Castle Dracula to finalize the estate transfer. I await your arrival, D." The wax seal was intricate, depicting a dragon pierced by a sword. As Jonathan's thumb brushed against it, he noticed it was still warm to the touch. The carriage ride from Budapest into the heart of Transylvania was long and increasingly unnerving. The landscapes grew wilder, the mountains more menacing. The driver, who had been talkative at first, fell silent the moment they crossed into the notorious Borgo Pass. In the distance, the howls of wolves became a constant, unsettling chorus. The horses grew skittish, their eyes wide with fear. Exactly at the stroke of midnight, a black carriage materialized from the swirling mist, drawn by four powerful, coal-black stallions. Its driver wore no discernible face, only a deep shadow beneath a wide-brimmed hat. With a pounding heart, Jonathan stepped out of the first carriage and into the second. The forest seemed to close in around them, swallowing them whole into its dark embrace. The castle was a wound in the mountainside, tall, jagged, and impossibly ancient. Its dark windows were like vacant eyes staring out into the abyss. The great gate swung open without a sound, as if by an unseen hand. At the top of a grand, sweeping staircase, a tall figure stood silhouetted against a single, flickering candelabra. As Jonathan drew closer, he saw him clearly. He was pale, unnervingly so, with a timeless quality to his features. His eyes were like hot coals set in a face as white as snow. "Welcome to my home, Mr. Harker," he said, his voice like smooth velvet stretched over broken glass. The first few days were a blur of legal documents and solitary meals in cavernous, dust-filled rooms. But on the third day, Jonathan noticed something profoundly strange. While he was shaving, he saw the Count enter the room behind him, but his host cast no reflection in the small hand mirror. Startled, Jonathan dropped it, and the glass shattered on the stone floor. Dracula's eyes flared with a sudden, crimson rage. "You should not keep such things," the Count hissed, his voice losing its velvet quality. "They show too much of the truth." That night, Jonathan locked his bedroom door, a futile gesture. He watched in horror as the old iron lock turned slowly, deliberately, on its own. He awoke later to hushed whispers, like the rustling of silk. 3 women stood at the foot of his bed. They were hauntingly beautiful, with skin as pale as moonlight and eyes that glowed like dying stars. They were hungry. One leaned in close, her breath as cold as a winter grave. "He promised you to us," she whispered, her lips parting to reveal sharp, white teeth. But before her lips could touch his throat, the door burst open. Dracula stood there, his face a mask of fury. "He is mine!" He roared, his voice shaking the very stones of the castle. The 3 women dissolved into a fine mist and vanished. Driven by sheer terror, Jonathan began to explore the castle, searching for any means of escape. His desperate search led him down a winding stone staircase into the cold, damp crypts beneath the castle. There, amidst rows of ancient coffins, he found what he was looking for. He saw the Count lying in a box of Transylvanian earth, his eyes wide open, a chilling, triumphant smile on his lips. Jonathan didn't hesitate. He ran. He scrambled through dark tunnels, scaled crumbling walls, and finally threw himself into the tangled forest. The wolves followed, their howls nipping at his heels. But as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, they stopped their pursuit. Jonathan collapsed at the gates of a monastery, half mad with fear and exhaustion, whispering a single, terrible word, Dracula. Months later, back in London, Mina Murray received a letter that brought both relief and deep concern. Jonathan was alive, recovering in a monastery, but the letter hinted that he was a changed man, haunted by his ordeal. At the same time, Mina's dear friend, Lucy Westenra, began exhibiting strange behavior. She started sleepwalking, wandering out into the night. She spoke dreamily of a mysterious man with red eyes and a voice like silk. Soon, she grew pale and frighteningly weak. On her neck, her physician, Dr. Seward, discovered small, mysterious puncture wounds. Baffled, Dr. Seward called in his old mentor, a brilliant Dutch professor named Abraham Van Helsing. Van Helsing arrived and immediately knew the signs. He spoke of ancient evils, of creatures that defy death, the undead. He spoke of Dracula. This is no ordinary vampire, he explained gravely to the skeptical men. He is the source, the storm, the first of his kind. They followed his strange instructions, filling Lucy's room with garlic flowers, placing crucifixes over her bed, and blessing the room with holy water. For a time, it seemed to work, but one night, a powerful storm raged, and her bedroom window shattered inwards. A large bat flew into the room. Lucy screamed. By morning, she was dead. Lucy was buried in a beautiful white gown, a picture of tragic innocence. But soon, disturbing reports began to surface. Children from the nearby village started disappearing, only to be found later with small wounds on their necks, telling stories of a bloofer lady who lured them away. Van Helsing, Dr. Seward, and Lucy's heartbroken fiancé, Arthur Holmwood, went to her tomb. They opened the heavy stone lid. It was empty. That night, they waited in the graveyard. Just after midnight, Lucy returned, but she was not the woman they knew. Her eyes glowed with an unholy light. Her lips were red with fresh blood. She glided towards Arthur, her arms outstretched in a predatory embrace. With a heavy heart, Van Helsing drove a sharpened stake through her heart. She let out a scream that sounded like 1,000 tortured souls being released at once. Their victory was short-lived. The horror had now turned to Mina. She began to change. She dreamed of howling wolves, of the taste of blood, of a dark castle shrouded in snow. One night, the men burst into her room to find a horrifying scene. Mina was in a trance, Dracula's mouth pressed against her throat, forcing her to drink from a wound on his own chest. He looked up at them, his eyes burning with infernal rage. "She is mine now," he snarled. "Flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood." Van Helsing held up a crucifix, and its holy power forced Dracula to recoil, vanishing into the shadows. Mina collapsed, weeping tears of blood. The hunt began. They followed Dracula's trail across Europe, racing against time. Through furious storms and blinding snow, across raging rivers and ancient ruins, they pursued him. Mina became their unwilling guide. Her mind was now linked to the vampires, a psychic connection forged by his terrible baptism. She could see what he saw, feel what he felt. "He is going home," she whispered, her voice distant, "to the castle, to his native earth. He is returning to his source of power." They raced against the setting sun, knowing that if Dracula reached his coffin before they could stop him, he would be unbeatable. The castle loomed before them once more, a black fang against the evening sky. As if on cue, the blood moon began to rise, bathing the mountains in an ethereal, crimson light. They found Dracula in the crypt, cloaked in darkness, waiting for them beside his coffin. "You cannot kill what is eternal," he said, his voice echoing in the cold, dead air. But Van Helsing was prepared. He had brought the sacred host, the sharpened stake, and a Gorka knife. Jonathan, his face a mask of grim determination, struck first. He drove the stake deep into Dracula's heart. The Count let out a final, inhuman scream of agony and rage. The very foundations of the castle shook and began to crumble, and then an absolute profound silence. At dawn, Mina awoke. She touched her throat. The cursed mark was gone. The first rays of the morning sun rose over the Carpathians, and as they touched the ancient stones of the castle, it crumbled into a pile of dust. The nightmare was over, but in the wind that swept through the pass, a faint whisper remained, a final echo of his malevolent will. I am the night, I am the hunger, I am Dracula, and somewhere, deep in the shadows of the world, a pair of red eyes opened, waiting. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the heart of darkness. If you enjoyed this retelling of a classic tale, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell for more stories from the shadows. Until next time, stay safe